The town of Willow Creek was the kind of place you could drive through in 5 minutes and still miss half of it. 1 main street, 2 diners, a church with a cracked bell that still managed to ring every Sunday, and fields, endless fields. That caught the golden light just right in the evenings and made you believe for a moment that miracles were possible. It was in that town, tucked behind a white picket fence and a front yard lined with worn-out garden gnomes, that 7-year-old Henry lived. Henry was the kind of boy who could find wonder in a puddle, magic in a mud pie, and adventure in a cardboard box. But lately, even cardboard castles couldn't distract him, because Henry was sick, the kind of sick that made adults whisper in the grocery store, the kind of sick that made the school nurse cry quietly behind her desk, the kind of sick that made doctors shift uncomfortably and use words no child should ever have to hear. The hospital had become a second home, beeping machines, scratchy blankets, the antiseptic smell that stuck to your clothes, no matter how many times you washed them. Henry didn't complain, though, not once. The only thing he ever said, the only thing he ever asked for, was simple. "I just want a puppy." He said it so matter-of-factly one evening to Nurse Clara, the woman who brought him grape popsicles and read him stories about faraway lands. She tucked his blanket tighter around him and smiled like it didn't break her heart a little. "What kind of puppy?" she asked, voice light, pretending she wasn't blinking back tears. Henry thought for a moment, scrunching up his nose. "One that needs me," he said. "Not a fancy one. Not one that everyone wants. Just one that needs somebody." Nurse Clara squeezed his hand. "That sounds like a very special kind of dog," she said. Henry nodded seriously. "It has to be, because I have a lot of love to give." At first, it was just a conversation, a moment shared between a tired nurse and a braver-than-he-should-be boy. But moments, like seeds, can grow into something bigger when planted in the right soil. That night, after her shift, Clara sat in her car with the keys still in the ignition, staring at the dashboard through blurred vision. She couldn't fix Henry. She couldn't erase the diagnosis or soften the blow. But maybe she could give him this. One real thing. One wish come true. She posted on a small local Facebook group. Nothing fancy, just a few hundred members from Willow Creek and neighboring towns. She explained about Henry without sharing too much. Explained about the puppy. Explained that it didn't have to be perfect, just real. Just waiting for a boy who had too much love and not enough time. She didn't expect much. A like or two. Maybe a comment from someone's cousin's neighbor. But sometimes hope moves faster than you think. Sometimes it doesn't whisper. It roars. The next morning, Clara woke to find her post shared nearly 1,000 times. There were comments from people she'd never met. Photos of dogs from shelters she didn't know existed. Messages from families offering to donate toys, food, anything. It was like Willow Creek had remembered something it had forgotten. That it wasn't just a town. It was a family. Among the flood of pictures and offers, one message caught Clara's eye. It was from a small, struggling animal rescued 2 towns over. "We have a puppy," the message read. "She's been overlooked for months, scared, shy, a little broken, but she's got a big heart." A photo was attached, a small golden retriever mix with a floppy ear and eyes so big and hopeful they hardly fit her tiny face. Sitting in the corner of her kennel like she was apologizing for taking up space. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle the sob that broke loose. Because she knew She knew this was the one. This was Henry's puppy. The rescue center named her Daisy. She wasn't much to look at by shelter standards. One ear drooped while the other stuck out sideways. She had a limp from a healed fracture no one could quite explain. And her fur? A patchy, uneven coat that no amount of brushing could fix. But Daisy had something more important. She had a heart that hadn't given up. Not yet. Not even after all the people who walked by her cage without stopping. When Clara showed up to meet her, Daisy didn't bark, didn't jump, didn't wag frantically like the others. She simply walked over, leaned gently against Clara's leg, and sighed. It was enough. It was everything. The shelter manager handed Clara the leash with tears brimming in his eyes. "No adoption fee," he said roughly. "She's already home." Clara drove back to Willow Creek with Daisy riding shotgun, head resting quietly in her lap. The setting sun painted the fields gold, and for a moment, Clara allowed herself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, there was enough goodness left in the world to make a difference. Henry's room was decorated with hand-drawn stars and superhero posters when Clara arrived. He sat propped up with extra pillows, his skin pale, but his eyes brighter than she'd ever seen them. He didn't say a word when Daisy limped into the room. He didn't have to. He reached out a trembling hand, and Daisy, without hesitation, crossed the distance between them. She laid her head on his lap, as if she'd always belonged there. Henry buried his face into her soft fur, and finally, let the tears come. The doctor said they hadn't seen him smile like that in months. The nurses cried in the hallway. Even the cafeteria lady, who was known for burning toast and scowling at everyone, wiped her eyes with the edge of her apron. For a little while, everything was okay. For a little while, the machines beeped softer. For a little while, the world outside that hospital room didn't matter. But life, as it often does, wasn't finished testing them yet. Henry's condition worsened faster than anyone expected. One morning, he couldn't sit up by himself. By afternoon, he barely spoke. He clung to Daisy's scruffy neck like she was the last thing keeping him anchored to this world. And maybe she was. The town of Willow Creek, having seen Clara's post, rallied in a way no one had ever seen before. The high school art club made banners. The local diner promised free meals for anyone attending the event they were planning. An adoption fair turned celebration, turned hope rally. Local news picked up the story. A boy's last wish, one puppy, one town, one chance to make it right. But 2 days before the big event, Henry disappeared. 1 minute he was there, resting with Daisy tucked against his side. The next, the nurses were scrambling. The monitors were silent. The room was empty. Panic tore through the hospital. Police were called. Search teams assembled. It was Clara who found the clue. A tiny crumpled note left under Henry's pillow. "Going to find my field of gold. Don't worry, Daisy's coming too." The whole town searched. The fields, the woods, every quiet corner Henry had ever loved. Clara drove the country roads, Daisy's leash clutched tight in her fist, calling his name until her voice broke. Hope, so recently restored, flickered dangerously. And somewhere under the vast, indifferent sky of Willow Creek, a small boy with too much love and too little time was trying to find his golden field. It was old Mr. Finley, the retired bus driver, who finally spotted them. At the far edge of town, beyond the broken fence where the wheat fields started, there, in a sea of gold waving under the early morning sun, sat Henry. Daisy lay curled protectively beside him, her head resting on his frail lap. Both of them framed perfectly by the rising light, like a painting nobody would ever be able to recreate. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. Clara was the first to reach him. She dropped to her knees in the dirt, brushing the hair from Henry's forehead. His skin was cool, but his eyes fluttered open at her touch. "You found it," she whispered. Henry smiled, a small, tired, but undeniable smile. "I wanted her to see it," he said, voice thin but certain. "My field of gold." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. She wasn't alone. Behind her, half the town had gathered quietly. Mothers holding toddlers, old men with hats pressed to their chests, teenagers trying and failing to look tough, all standing in silent witness to a boy who had never stopped believing. They carried him back carefully, Henry in his father's arms, Daisy walking beside them like a little soldier, one paw after the other, her limp more pronounced but her spirit unshakable. The town's event, the one they'd planned to celebrate his wish, transformed that day into something much bigger, something sacred. They strung banners from every lamppost. They set out tables of lemonade and homemade pies. They built a makeshift stage where a tired mayor wiped his eyes and stumbled through a speech about bravery and love and small miracles. And when Henry, pale and beaming, was wheeled onto the stage with Daisy cradled gently in his lap, the crowd rose to its feet, not just in applause, but in recognition, in awe of a boy who had asked for one small thing and given them something bigger in return. Emotional climax, the true miracle. Henry didn't get better in the way movies like to pretend. Real life is messier, harder, more beautiful because of it. There were bad days, scary nights, tubes and needles and whispered conversations just out of his hearing. But there were good days, too. Better days. Days filled with muddy paw prints across clean floors, and Daisy curling up under his hospital bed, snoring softly. Days where Henry laughed so hard it echoed down sterile hallways and made even the sternest nurses smile. The love between boy and dog didn't cure everything. It didn't fix the broken places, but it stitched them together just enough. Enough to hold on, enough to fight. And sometimes, that's all a miracle really is. Henry's story didn't end the way some might have feared. He grew stronger, slowly, stubbornly, one sunrise at a time. He went home, first for weekends, then forever. The town of Willow Creek didn't forget. How could they? They started a tradition that first summer after Henry came home, the Field of Gold Festival. Every year, right when the wheat bloomed bright and golden, the whole town gathered, not to mourn, not to fear, but to celebrate hope, the way a small boy and a small dog taught them to. And every year, Henry, taller now, stronger, stood beside Daisy, a little older, a little slower, but still just as devoted. Two imperfect souls who needed each other, who saved each other, just like Henry asked, just like Daisy promised. Because sometimes the smallest wishes change the biggest hearts. Forever. Love, loyalty, and hope don't always arrive in grand moments. Sometimes they come quietly, on 4 small paws, or in the smile of a child who refuses to give up. If this story touched your heart, there are so many more stories waiting to be shared. Stories of second chances, of faith that never wavers, of the bonds that make us whole. Tell us in the comments, what story would you love to hear next? Because every heart has a journey, and every journey deserves to be told. Thank you for watching.